Hello from Halifax. This is Jo with Jo to the World Creations, and today we're going to be making my easy shell blanket crochet pattern. I am so excited to share this crochet shell blanket with you, and we're going to be getting right to the video tutorial. Everything you need to know about this pattern, including the hook size and how much yarn is required, as well as the step-by-step written instructions, they're all available entirely for free on my website, or you can purchase the ad-free, print-ready PDF, and there are links to both below this video. All right, let's get started. We're going to start by making a slip knot. I make a slip knot by making a loop, putting my fingers through the loop, picking up the yarn, and pulling on the ends. And simply put your loop on your hook and pull the ends so that the loop is now securely on your hook. Now we're going to chain 104. It's 1, 2, 3. You go ahead and make 104 starting chains and come back to the video. With your starting chains now made, we are going to begin row 1. For row 1 only, we're going to be working into the back ridge loops, which are these bumps along the back. We're going to start by working into the second chain from the hook. So that's the first, this is the second. We're going to twist our work and find the second back ridge loop and insert our hook into that back bump. And then we're going to single crochet. We are going to single crochet in each back ridge loop all the way across. So insert your hook under the next back ridge loop and then single crochet. So working all the way across the row, simply insert your hook into the back ridge loop of each chain and single crochet. Come back to the video when you've single crocheted all the way across row 1. I'm nearing the end of row 1. I have 1 chain left to work into. Just want to point out that we don't work into the slip knot. So working into the last back ridge loop, we just do the same thing. Insert your hook under that back ridge loop and then single crochet. At the end of row 1, you should have a total of 103 single crochet stitches. In this pattern, chains do not count as stitches. So only count the tops of the stitches, not chains, and this is our first stitch that we made. So that counts as stitch number 1, and then count all the way across to ensure you have 103. To start row 2, we are going to chain 1 and turn. We are going to work into the first stitch, which is the stitch that's attached to that chain 1 that we just made. Working into the first stitch, we're going to single crochet. Now we're going to begin a number of steps that we are going to repeat all across the row. And the repeat portion of this pattern begins with skip the next 2 stitches. That means to skip the next stitch and the stitch after that. So we'll be working into the next stitch. And into the next stitch, we are going to make our first shell. In this pattern, a shell is 5 double crochet stitches into the same stitch. So skip the next 2 stitches. In the next stitch, we're going to make our first of 5 double crochet stitches. There's 1. In the same stitch, we're going to make 2 of 5, and then we're going to make a third and a fourth, and finally a 5th double crochet stitch in the same stitch, and now we've made our first shell. The next step in our repeat is to skip the next 2 stitches. So we don't work in the next stitch or the next stitch. And the last step in our repeat is to work in the next stitch, and into this stitch we are going to single crochet. So skip the next 2 stitches, into the next stitch, single crochet. So those are the steps that you'll be repeating all the way across the row. Here they are again. Skip the next 2 stitches, in the next stitch make a shell, skip the next 2 stitches, and in the next stitch single crochet. Repeat those steps all the way across, and as you're nearing the end of the row, come back to the video. I have 1 repeat left at the end of this row. Nothing special happens, but I'll quickly show you how we finish the row. I've just made a single crochet stitch, so I'm now going to do the repeat one more time. Skip the next 2 stitches, in the next stitch make a shell. With my 5 double crochet stitches now completed, the last step is to skip the next 2 stitches, and in the next stitch make a single crochet stitch. And so your last stitch of the row should be a single crochet stitch into this last stitch. The written instructions includes a detailed stitch count for each row. It's going to tell you how many shells you should have in the row, as well as how many single crochet stitches you should have, just to ensure you have the correct number of stitches. To start row 3, we're going to chain 2. 1, 2. And then we're going to turn our work. Once again, we're going to be working into the first stitch. This is the stitch that's attached to that chain 2 that we just made. So working into this first stitch, we are going to make 3 double crochet stitches all into the first stitch. So there's 1. Still working into the same first stitch. There's 2, and there's 3 double crochet stitches now made in the first stitch. Next, we're going to skip the next 2 stitches. So we're not going to work into the next 2 stitches, we're going to work into the next stitch after that, which is the top of the middle double crochet stitch that was made in a shell in the previous row. Into this stitch here, we are going to single crochet. So skip those 2 stitches, into the next stitch, single crochet. Next, we're going to skip the next 2 stitches. We're now going to begin the repeat portion of the row, where we're going to repeat a number of steps all the way across. And the first of those steps is to make a shell in the next stitch. This is the top of the single crochet stitch from the previous row. So into that stitch, we're going to make a shell. I'm skipping those 2 stitches, and now beginning the repeat of making a shell in the next stitch. Once again, a shell is 5 double crochet stitches, all in the same stitch. So I have 5 double crochet stitches all made into the same stitch, and my shell is now complete. The next step in our repeat is to skip the next 2 stitches. So we don't work into the next stitch or the stitch after that. We're now going to work into the next stitch, which is the top of the middle double crochet stitch from the shell in the previous row. And into the top of that stitch, we're going to single crochet. So skip the next 2 stitches, into the next stitch, single crochet. And the last step of our repeat is to skip the next 2 stitches. And now we repeat the instructions, all those steps that we're going to repeat across the entire row. At the end, you should have 1 stitch left. Since I only have 1 repeat left in my row, I'll just quickly show you what that last repeat looks like. Nothing really special happens, but just so you can see exactly how to do it. So we're going to skip the next 2 stitches, which is the end of the repeat, and then the repeat starts with make a shell in the next stitch. So 5 double crochet stitches into the next stitch. Now we skip the next 2 stitches. In the next stitch, make a single crochet stitch. And then skip the next 2 stitches. After your last repeat, you should have 1 stitch left. That's the last stitch in the row. In this last stitch, we're going to make 3 double crochet stitches into this last stitch. There's my first. There's my second of 3 double crochet stitches into the last stitch. And finally, there's 3 double crochet stitches now made in the last stitch. The written pattern indicates how many stitches you should have, so it's going to break it down by how many double crochet stitches you should have that are not included in a shell. So in this row you should have 6 double crochet stitches, 3 at the start and 3 at the end, and then follow the written instructions for how many shells you should have and then how many single crochet stitches you should have. To start row 4, we're going to chain 1 and turn. Once again, we're going to be working into the first stitch, the stitch that's attached to the chain. Into this first stitch, we're going to make a single crochet. So single crochet in the first stitch. Then we're going to skip the next 2 stitches. So don't work into the next stitch or the stitch after that. In the stitch after that, which is the top of a single crochet stitch from the previous row, we're going to make a shell. You go ahead and make 5 double crochet stitches into the same stitch. Next, we're going to skip the next 2 stitches, working into the next stitch, which is the top of the middle double crochet stitch from the shell in the previous row. We're going to single crochet. Now we're going to begin the repeat portion of this pattern. The repeat portion starts out with the first step is to skip the next 2 stitches. So we don't work into those 2 stitches. Into the next stitch, make a shell. The next step in the repeat is to skip the next 2 stitches. And then finally, the final step in the repeat is to single crochet in the next stitch. And that's what you're going to repeat all the way across. Since I'm on my last repeat right now, I'll quickly show you how the row finishes. So the first step in the repeat is to skip the next 2 stitches, then make a shell in the next stitch. And with your shell now made, skip the next 2 stitches and make a single crochet stitch in the next stitch. Since this is the last time we're repeating the repeat, the last stitch in the row is the single crochet stitch. So into the last stitch of the row, simply single crochet. For row 5 and on, you're going to repeat rows 3 and 4 consecutively until the height of the blanket measures approximately 34 inches high, which for me was 68 rows in total. But feel free to continue repeating those 2 rows consecutively until you reach your desired height. Make sure to end after completing a row 4. Row 4 was what we just completed. It's the row where you end with a single crochet stitch, not the row where we end with 3 double crochet stitches in the last stitch. Make sure you've ended after a single crochet stitch in the last stitch, which means you've just finished a row 4. Once you reach your desired height, do not fasten off. At that point, come back to the video and we will begin the blanket border. Now we're going to start the blanket border. Once again, just ensure that you've finished after a row 4. To start the border, round 1, we're going to chain 1 and turn our work. We are going to work into the first stitch, the stitch that's attached to that chain 1 that we just made. And into this first stitch, we're going to make 3 single crochet stitches into the same stitch. So working into that first stitch, make 1 of 3 single crochet stitches, 2 of 3, and that's 3 of 3 single crochet stitches now made in that first stitch. That's going to be our first corner of the border. Now we are going to single crochet in each stitch across, all the way across the top until there is 1 stitch left. So working into the top of each stitch, simply single crochet in each stitch across. Then come back to the video when you have 1 stitch left. So I've single crocheted all the way across the top into each stitch, and I have 1 stitch left. Into this last stitch across the top, we're going to make 3 single crochet stitches into this stitch. That's 1, 2, and 3. And that completes our second corner. Now we're going to rotate our work so that we can work down the side of the blanket. So we're going to be working all the way down the side, but I'm just rotating my work so that it's easier to work into. The instructions for this part say to work down the side and into the stitches at the end of each row, and a single crochet evenly all the way down. What this means is that we are going to make single crochet stitches into the ends of the stitches at the end of the row all the way down. The exact placement of the stitches is not important, and the exact stitch count doesn't matter. The goal is to have evenly spaced out single crochet stitches all the way down. You want to work into the stitches, and you can either insert your hook under 1 loop, or you may find there's some parts where you want to insert your hook under 2 loops, and either one is okay. What you don't want to do is to work into spaces where it's a space between two stitches. We want to actually single crochet into the stitches, not into the spaces. Where I worked into is at the end of each row. There's either a double crochet stitch that you'd be working into, or a single crochet stitch and a chain one, it's combined, that you'd work into. So here's what I did that got them, I think, really evenly spaced out. Into each double crochet stitch that you work into, I made a single crochet stitch in the top of the double crochet stitch, and then another single crochet stitch into the bottom. And then when I got to the single crochet slash chain one, I made a single crochet stitch into that stitch. So that's how I was able to evenly space them out. Now, your exact placement of these single crochet stitches does not matter. You just want to have them evenly spaced out, but I'll show you exactly where I worked into. So working down, let's start by working into this double crochet stitch here. Working into the first part of the double crochet stitch, going to insert our hook into the stitch and single crochet. Now working into the bottom half of that double crochet stitch. See, this one I might find it easier to insert my hook under 2 loops and then single crochet. Now comes the part where there's a single crochet stitch and a chain stitch, so you can find a place around that stitch to work into. And like I say, the exact placement does not matter. You don't need to replicate what I'm doing exactly, but hopefully this is helpful. So now I'm going to come across a double crochet stitch. So in the top half of that, I'm going to single crochet, and then into the bottom half of that, single crochet. You can keep repeating that all the way down, and when you get to the very end of working down the side, come back to the video. After single crocheting evenly all down the side, we're going to rotate our work so that we can work along the bottom into the very first chain, which is the chain that's attached to the slip knot that we made to start the pattern. Into this first chain here, working under both loops, we are going to make 3 single crochet stitches into that first chain. So insert your hook into that first chain, single crochet, and now we're going to make 2 more single crochet stitches into that same chain, and this is going to make our 3rd corner. Now we're going to work into each chain across the bottom until there is 1 chain left. But until that last chain, we are going to insert our hook into the chain under both loops, and it can be a little tight, and we're going to single crochet in each chain across. So simply work into each chain and single crochet. You're going to do that all the way across until there is 1 chain left, and then come back to the video. So I've just finished single crocheting across the chains, and I have 1 chain left to work into. Into this last chain, we're going to make 3 single crochet stitches into the same chain. There's 1, and this is going to make our 4th corner. And there's 3 single crochet stitches now complete. Now we're going to rotate our work so we can work up the side. We're going to do the same thing that we did when we worked down the side. So we're going to work into the stitches at the end of the row and simply single crochet evenly all the way up. You can use the same format that I used, where I work into the bottom half of a double crochet stitch and the top half, And then when I get to the chain 1 single crochet stitch, insert my hook into whatever nearest loop I can find, and then single crochet. So keep single crocheting all the way up, and when you are about to get to the place where we've made that first corner, come back to the video and we'll join the round together. So I finished single crocheting evenly all the way up the side, and I'm just about at the place where we started the round. And to finish the round, we're going to slip stitch into the top of the first single crochet stitch that we made when we started border round 1. We made 3 single crochet stitches into that first stitch, and we're going to slip stitch into the first of those 3 single crochet stitches to join the round. So inserting your hook into the top of that first single crochet stitch under both loops and simply slip stitch. Now we're going to begin border round 2. To start, we are going to chain 1 and we're going to turn our work. For this round, we are going to be making single crochet stitches in each stitch all the way around, with the exception of the corner stitches. The corner stitches so for each corner there's 1 stitch that you will work into, and that's the middle of the 3 single crochet stitches we made in the corner in the previous round. So in every stitch you make 1 single crochet stitch until you get to the corner, and into this corner stitch you're going to make 3 single crochet stitches into this corner stitch. After completing the corner, you go back to repeating single crochet in each stitch until the next corner, and you're going to do that all the way around. Working into the first stitch, the stitch that's attached to the chain, you're going to single crochet and then single crochet in each stitch around. So I've just arrived at a corner stitch. Into this corner stitch, I'm going to make 3 single crochet stitches into the same stitch. And then resume 1 single crochet stitch in each stitch until the next corner. You go ahead and do that all the way around. When you get near to the end of the round, come back to the video and we will join the round together. I've just single crocheted all the way around, making 3 single crochet stitches in each corner, and I have 1 corner left to work into. So I have 3 stitches left. In the stitch before the corner, I will make a single crochet stitch. In the corner stitch, once again, 3 single crochet stitches into the same stitch, and into the last stitch, single crochet. To join the round, we're going to slip stitch into the first single crochet stitch that we made in this round. So insert your hook under both loops and slip stitch. For borders round 3, 4, and 5, you're going to do the exact same thing that we just did. You're going to chain 1 and turn, and you're going to single crochet all the way around except for at the corner. And in the corner stitch, you're going to make 3 single crochet stitches, and you're going to do that for all 4 corners. When you get back to the place where you started, join the round with a slip stitch into the top of the first single crochet stitch that you made in the round. You go ahead and complete borders round 3, 4, and 5, and then come back to the video. I've just finished border round 5. Now we're going to start border round 6. And to start the round, we're going to chain 1 and turn. The first thing we're going to do is slip stitch into the first stitch. That's the stitch attached to the chain. It's a little tight, but we're just going to work into it and make a slip stitch. Now we're going to be beginning the repeat portion of the round. And what we'll be doing for the entire round is skipping the next stitch so we don't work into the next stitch. In the following stitch, we make a shell. And just as a reminder, a shell is 5 double crochet stitches in the same stitch. So I've made a slip stitch here, skip the next stitch, in the next stitch, make a shell. 5 double crochet stitches into the same stitch. I now have 5 double crochet stitches now completed into that same stitch. The next step in the repeat is to skip the next stitch. Working into the next stitch, we're going to slip stitch. And this is what we're going to be repeating all the way around. So one more time, skip the next stitch, into the next stitch, make a shell, 5 double crochet stitches into the same stitch, and after you've made your shell, skip the next stitch, and in the next stitch, slip stitch. And those are the instructions you're going to be repeating all the way around. For this round, nothing special happens at the corners. So I've just made a slip stitch. I'm going to skip the next stitch, make a shell in the next stitch, skip the next stitch, slip stitch in the next stitch. And your corners might look a little differently, but that's okay. And each corner might be slightly different, but I find that it still has a really stunning look when we don't do anything special at the corners. When you are nearing the end of the round, come back to the video and we will finish the round together. I am almost at the end of border round 6, and I want to talk about what happens if you don't have the correct number of stitches to follow the pattern exactly as we've been following it all the way around. Let's work backwards for a second. The last stitch in the round, we are going to slip stitch into the first slip stitch that we made to start border round 6. So if we work backwards, the stitch before that should be a skipped stitch. The stitch before that should be a shell. The stitch before that should be a skipped stitch. And the stitch before that should be a slip stitch. And I'm going to talk about what happens, for example, in what I'm showing you right now. The stitch you're looking at right here is a slip stitch. So my stitches are not going to work for how the pattern should be and what we've done all the way around. But don't worry, there's a simple solution. All we need to do is skip more or less stitches as we approach that first slip stitch. And it might take some experimenting to see what you like the best. What I'm going to try first is making, so now I've made a slip stitch. What I should be doing is skipping the next stitch and making a shell in the next stitch, but I'm going to experiment with making a shell in the very next stitch, so I'm skipping less stitches. But like I say, you can see what works best for you. Perhaps you want to try skipping 2 stitches and then making a shell and then slip stitching into that first stitch. That might be what you like, might look best. I'm going to try making 2 shells before that first shell and see how it looks. So I've just made a shell. I'm going to skip the next stitch, but again, this is completely customizable, and feel free to back up a number of shells in order to make the end of the round work. Just simply skip more or less stitches until you're happy with the results. And so now I'm going to skip the stitch before the slip stitch, and then I'm going to slip stitch into the first slip stitch made in the round. And the slip stitch comes up a little bit, but once we weave in our ends, we tuck this in there. And you may decide, you know what, that's a little too bulky. You want to back up and only have one shell here, and that's completely fine too. But I think that is hardly noticeable. And I personally love not doing anything special at the corners. I think that just looks really, really nice. So that completes the pattern. What is left to do now is we are going to fasten off. So we're going to cut our yarn, leaving enough of an end that we can weave in our loose ends. And with your yarn needle, just weave in your loose ends. As I mentioned, when we make that slip stitch, it's raised up a little bit compared to the other slip stitches. So I just like to tuck that behind, and that can be tucked behind when we weave in our ends. And you go ahead and weave in your ends. The blanket is fully reversible, so I found the best place to hide them was using your yarn needle. Weave the yarn through the border, and then I like to tuck the ends inside the shell, and I found that they stayed really hidden once they were tucked inside a middle of a shell. And now you have a new shell blanket. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoy making this blanket. I would love to see your finished blankets. I'm here if there's anything I can do to help. Please let me know. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day.